Anyway, I always wanted Angus Lynn to be royalty too, because Angus is a great character in New Orleans. He's unique in terms of his writing and his way of words. And he was always, and he's also a yat too. He never had a yat yet, unless you call Chef Paul Prudhomme a yat. But yeah, he's Cajun mostly. Yats are not Cajuns. Cajuns can be yats. But anyway, we wanted Angus Lynn to be royalty that year, and I talked to him, and he and his wife Anne were gracious enough to accept. And it was the first year that Le Monde de Merde appeared as a crew newspaper, which you're probably reading now. It's great for bottom of bird gauges too. Anyway, I came up with the idea of Le Monde de Merde, because the Clones did a newspaper one time too, and I thought that was great. And I said, well, if we got a writer here, it should be, let's do a newspaper. So that was the first year Le Monde de Merde came to print. I employed the talents of Keith Twitchell, who was the editor and writer, very skilled, gifted writer. And we kind of got together over many bottles of wine and kind of threw together the Le Monde de Merde Volume 1. And that's how that started, and it's one of the crew traditions that we're continuing. But also, we're still building the royalty float based upon royalty. I think we had Angus Lynn sitting on top of a royal typewriter on a space bar. And so we made that happen. It was in the back of a Quonset Hut warehouse on Chapatula Street. You know? And like I said, we've always pulled this together in ways that can't be explained. 1993, after continuing to quit, it was the year when they had the infamous Mardi Gras ordinance that said that the blue blood crews have to become more open, and more Dorothy Mae Taylor was the city councilwoman who wanted that to happen. Yeah. And so there was a lot of controversy at that time, and some of the old line crews refused to march as a consequence. We lost Momus, we lost Proteus, well, whoever they are, look in your history books. We lost quite a few, but a lot of people were glad to see that transition. And even in the own crew itself, we came up with a theme lamenting this loss, but yet in a funny way. We had to come up with a theme of posthumously yours. Now take off on posthumously. And this is posthumously. And, okay, we had a theme, lamenting the change that's happening in Mardi Gras. And we had no idea who the king was going to be, or queen, or whoever. And it just came to me, I had met this fellow by the name of Henri Schindler a year before, and saw him to be quite a witty fellow, and funny as hell, and a wicked sense of humor. And so I asked him to be king that year. And it turns out he's a Mardi Gras designer, a historian. He's, very famous in New Orleans. And he agreed to be king. And at this time, we always were rebuilding our royalty floats. And I was talking to another captain of the crew, Keith Gras, who's Mondo. He says, man, do you think we can get him to build this float? He says, and I said, well, I don't know, maybe we can ask him. So before I even got to ask him, he asked me, he says, you mind if I could build my float? Well, let me see, yeah. And so we had somewhat of a stable route at that time, but I wanted to route the parade past the Boston Club. Just for grins. And it was amazing what happened, because each subcrew had pros and cons about the whole deal. Some crews were glad that the blue blood, old line segregation crews were gone, and some of the other crews were losing that sense of history and tradition. And so there were, what we did, we stopped at the Boston Club and we made a presentation. I stood there in the front of the door. I was the Grim Reaper. It was, death with a clown face, basically. And I stood in front of the Boston Club while each of the subcrews, Henri made a little presentation, but each of the subcrews put some little artifact or some memento for that crew, their crew, at the door of the Boston Club.
They wouldn't answer the door?
No.
Good. You weren't there.
I think they were closed at the time.
Yeah.
But, you know, some people had candles and, you know, cards, and other people had little dog turds, you know. And again, we don't tell the crew what to do. Each of the sub-crews came up with some way that they were, you know, sad or glad about the whole thing. But symbolically, that was kind of like, you know, kind of a cool thing, you know, to do something like that. And then we went off and had our party, and I swear, after the party was over, this was at the warehouse district, I had a cab fare back. It was like 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning. I said, stop me by the Boston Club, just to see, you know. And I went there, and everything was still there. The candles were lit. It was like a little shrine. The dog turrets were unmoved. And that's the sort of thing you can't plan. You really can't. And part of the, you know, my style of the Krewe du Vieux, of being that way, was just like to be as loose as possible. I mean, you need some organization to get things done. But at that time, we were a smaller group, and, you know, that sort of style could probably get away with it a little bit. But the crew started growing there. People started wanting to join. And at the time, you know, we were more than happy to welcome them. So 1994 was the election year, the Ballot of New Orleans was our theme that year. Our king was Danny Barker. And here's a guy I saw at Jazz Fest many times, and he's a spry old guy for 80, you know, and so let's make him be king, you know. And he accepted, and first we went to ask him and Blue Lou Barker. We went over to St. Bernard Housing Project where he was staying, and asked him if he had any questions for me about being king. He said, yeah, is it going to cost me any money? I told him, no, it's not like the other organizations. Sometimes you got to do that. You know? Well, he was a real gem. We had a fundraiser that year at the Rock and Bowl. And I didn't invite him because he was old. You know, I figured he would be able to go up the steps of the Rock and Bowl or anything. Lo and behold, guess who shows up? Danny Barker. He's, you know, trying to get his way up the Rock and Bowl steps, and he showed up anyway. He says he didn't know who the hell we were. He wanted to see what kind of crazies we were. And the guy was just indomitable. Unfortunately, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer about a month before the parade. And he couldn't ride the float. It was chilly weather and all that, so we had to put him in a car in the back. But you can't have a royalty float go down the streets parade empty. Symbolically, it's just not a good thing to do. So about 1 minute before the parade started, the parade captain shoved me into the royalty float and said, ride it. And I says, if I've done this before, I don't have to do it again. He says, no, you got to have it. Henry Schindler was there saying, you got to do this. So we had a sign that says, the king's in the car in the back, and I rode the float throughout cups, and I realized at the first time that they don't care who the king is, they just want a cup. I says, I'm not the king. Hey, king, throw me a cup. I'm not the king. I don't care. Throw me a cup. So all you people who have been royalty, don't let it get to your head.